Hi everyone, thank you for joining. We will give it a few more minutes and we'll let other people join before we begin. Thank you. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone, depending on where you guys are joining us from. Welcome to our exciting webinar, Navigating the GenAI Frontier, a Data Security Quest. I'm Dana Ove, VP Marketing here at Flow, and it's my pleasure to be here. Today, we're embarking on an insightful journey into the world of data security, particularly in the context of the rapidly evolving GenAI landscape. This topic is not just timely, but also critical as we navigate the complexities and opportunities that GenAI presents in the field of data security. I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce our esteemed speaker for today, Natia Golan, Chief Product Officer here at Flow Security. Natia brings a wealth of knowledge and experience in data security, and her insights today will undoubtedly shed light on how we can better equip ourselves in this dynamic environment. Just a quick note before we begin, please feel free to ask your questions at any time using the question box, and we will address these at the end during a dedicated Q&A session. So without further ado, let's delve into the world of GenAI and data security. Over to you, Natia.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dana, for the very warm welcome. I'm very excited to be here and talk about GenAI, and specifically a very interesting question that we've been being asked quite some time now by our customers and the entire community. And the question is, should GenAI security be integrated with your data security program? Now, this is a kind of a high-level question, and basically it's not. I mean, in the details of it, there are some basic questions as where should the budget come from? Who is the relevant team that needs to take care of this problem? Should it be a separate product that handles GenAI security, or should you really ask your existing vendors and platforms to handle this? Because the consolidation, trend is becoming more than just a trend. It's actually happening, and security leaders are now asking more than they used to from their existing vendors and existing products. So if that's happening, maybe we need to kind of look into things quite seriously and to understand before we take into new solutions, could the existing ones really come in hand for new challenges that we're seeing? Now, before we deep dive into all the different aspects, let's start from a very interesting statement by Forrester. So Forrester is stating that data breaches that include a human element are going to increase to 90%, up from the current estimations of 74%. And they claim that the increase will be down to the impact of specifically GenAI and what it's going to do on social engineering attacks, that they're going to become more simpler and faster. This is kind of scary, but it also even says that basically GenAI problems are data security problems. So is it the same? Because if you look at it, like in terms of our hunch, then GenAI kind of equals data. You're analyzing data, data goes in, data goes out, data processing, data training, new data sets. So if it's the same, why is it a new problem? Why is everyone starting to address GenAI security as a new, problem and new solutions that need to handle this? Well, maybe it's because the answer is not that, easy. Maybe it's because there are some similarities, or maybe a lot of similarities, because GenAI is in some way kind of equals data, but there are some differences. Now let's talk about those differences specifically, and let's try to understand how those differences are very much important to you as security teams, and how you as CISOs need to handle those differentiators. So first of all, let's look at a specific example that we have. This is an example for probably any customer that we have. They have, let's say there's a GenAI external service, a third party. Your product teams and your developers have decided to use this amazing third party that does miracles and really expedites so many processes. Until that day you've integrated with this third party, they were tedious and they took a lot of time. Everyone is super happy. Everyone but you, because you have less control about what is happening. Because in any way to control external services was a very difficult job. But now, with the fact that there is a specific GenAI, there is a specific service that its entire purpose in life is to take in data and to push new data internally within organizations, the ability to control that service has become even a bigger challenge. And specifically, it has a bigger challenge. It's become a bigger challenge because of these four main pillars. One is the fact that we're talking about more volume of specifically sensitive data. If we'll take that specific use case of a GenAI, of an external service, of a GenAI external service, then in many cases, those services are meant to process sensitive data. They're meant to process customers' data. In that case, we're talking about even more volume in higher speed of sensitive data moving internally, externally, leaving your internal services premises. If that's not enough, then we're not necessarily under control of what's going to happen once the data is going to get to that external service. Once the training is done, who knows how that service is going to analyze that data? And that's even a bigger problem if you need to be, and if you as an organization need to be under specific regulations and need to meet privacy laws and so forth. So the transparency and the ability to know exactly what type of data is flowing to those services is critical than ever. And the fourth part is the fact that more and more unstructured data, more files, more images are being flown, are moving in motion to those services. And it really makes the problem of classification of those type of data even bigger than they were until now. So until now, we've kind of we've tackled the fact that GenAI in many ways equals data, but the problem is actually being is larger than we had until now. And it means that for you as security leaders, it means bigger risk for data loss, for privacy violations, and for compliance breaches. And it also means that you need to have better control over what is happening. Because if there's one thing that we know, is that business and product teams will continue to move faster and quicker, and innovation will not stop because we as security teams have more problems of being under control. We need to find the ways of how we can be in control of what is happening within the organization. So we need to see how we take these new capabilities, and we also empower developers and product teams to embrace these new capabilities, but also we're in control of what is happening. If we look at what used to happen until now with traditional data security solutions, well, we used to look at protecting data at rest via infrastructure protection. That means that we are continuing even today to scan those databases statically, and those buckets. We're enforcing database encryption, which, by the way, all of these things are super critical and super relevant, but they're not enough. Because if we're looking things statically, if we look at data only as it resting, we're kind of missing the point of looking at real-time detection of things that are happening quickly. And we need to be able to also respond to those changes in a more proactive way versus just waiting to finish some kind of a task and then handling the things that happened. So we're here to say that these new problems really need new ways to tackle them. We need to have a more proactive approach. We need to look at data not only as it's resting, but also to analyze it as it's moving around in motion, as applications are processing sensitive data, at rest, in use, and in motion. We need to be able to enforce runtime data policies. It's not enough to be based on some type of a log that mentions that data, some kind of a sensitive data left one database and moved to another application. It's just not enough. We need to have a capability to really analyze the payload itself, to know the impact, the context, what type of sensitive data was it. There's a huge difference if it was 100 data sets of sensitive information or millions of it. The impact on business will be critical, as you all know. And this brings me probably to kind of summarize this webinar and to say that just like Gartner phrased it well, businesses will embrace generative AI regardless of security. And it's really up to us as security leaders to push the businesses forward, to empower them, but also see how we can be still under control. From our perspective at Flow, we believe that Gen AI is definitely a data security concern, and it's definitely needs to be part of a data security program, because Gen AI simply expedites or makes the problem bigger for data security teams. And if that is happening, then we need to understand that the current solutions that we've been using until now are simply not enough. So thank you so much for joining me. I'll be more than welcome to answer the questions now. So we have really good questions here, I can already say. So let's start from the first one. You put a lot of focus on runtime being critical to solving GenAI security. Why? That's a great question. I think it's a great one because it really also puts emphasis on how we Flow view data security in general. So I can say that I'm putting a lot of emphasis on runtime for GenAI security because I'm putting a lot of emphasis on runtime for data security in general. I strongly believe that to prevent data leaks and to do it in the most effective way, it's not enough to have a data security product that is very static, that scans databases, that looks into buckets at rest, just like we've mentioned. Or it's not even enough to say we're analyzing logs. Log analysis is great. There are many things that we can do with it, but you're basically dependent on the fact that someone turned on those logs. So in generally speaking, for data security, if you're dependent on someone doing something, and then for you to say, then if someone did something, then I'll be able to detect those data leaks, then that's kind of fundamentally wrong. Because the problem, or the reason the data leaks are happening, is because you have so many human elements. And I think that specifically for data security, you need always to look where you don't know what you're looking for. So that's one reason. The second reason is that only by analyzing the payload itself, by looking what's moving and doing the classification on the payload itself, is the only way to actually know what is the impact of the potential data leak. You need to know if it's a specific email address, if it's a customer email address, or just a general email address, and you will only know that if you're actually analyzing the payload as it flows from one place to another. Once you've determined the impact, and then you know the context of where the data is moving from, which application is communicating which another application externally, if it's via an API, or what type of communication is there, then you can also talk about how you can proactively even enforce that movement or a security violation. And all of these three stages, like the classification itself, understanding the impact, and be able to proactively block that problematic data flow, those things are doable with only analyzing in runtime. I hope I answered your question. Okay, let's move on to the second one. Do you feel that GenAI security is the responsibility of security teams, or should it be more a shift left approach within developers? Well, I think that it is definitely security teams' responsibility to have better controls and to be able to enforce those security policies. But it also, I mean, it doesn't take the responsibility from the developers to I would say that developer needs to know why they're building something, or why they're, from a product perspective, why they're working on a certain feature. They also need to own that, but also need to know that they need to build features and products securely. I mean, they have that responsibility, but it doesn't mean that the ownership to make sure and to control and to understand the risk and also to prevent data leaks is within developers' organizations. The same thing as it's in the developments, it's not their kind of responsibility to say if eventually the feature is going to meet the product KPIs or not. They're together with us. I mean, we're all one team, we're one company, and we share many areas. But the accountability and the end, I believe it does remain within the security organization. Okay, the third question. Who should GenAI security be handled by? By the cloud DLP team or the data security team? Okay, this is extremely interesting question because I think it also kind of takes under the assumption that there are two different teams, that there's a DLP or a cloud DLP team, and there's a data security team. So I think that this might be the case where the enterprise or the company is very, very mature in terms of data security. In that case, there could be a team handling specifically cloud DLP concerns, and a specific team responsible for posture analysis, let's say, or governance or risk analysis and so forth. I think in generally, data leakage prevention should be handled by the teams who are very much, working with similar data leakage products, for example, with endpoints or so forth. I think that posture analysis in general is super important and could be part of the data security program in general. But I think maybe more interesting question is to ask how these two teams, DLP and data security in cloud in general, are going to be in, let's say, 2 to 3 years from now. I think we're going to see, just like we're seeing a lot of movement in the products and in the platforms, it's going to impact drastically how security teams are built. So I think these two things are going to happen kind of together. Okay, I'm moving on to the next one. Can a DSPM solution solve these GenAI data problems? So in generally, I think that DSPM or posture analysis is very important, and it's something that we really need to analyze also in the context of GenAI. But if the question is if DSPM can prevent data leaks, and when I say DSPM, I mean the ability to statically scan databases and to do the discovery within the cloud premises of the managed databases and buckets and assets, data stores, then I would say no, because the ability to proactively enforce policies and to actually classify and discover sensitive data flowing internally to external areas, just like in the use case that we've discovered, then it will be very difficult, and not necessarily will it give us the ability to actually control those data leaks and to prevent those data leaks. It will give us the ability to understand the general posture at certain extent, but to actually be proactive and block even, not necessarily. So that's something that I think is really very much linked to the first question that I was asked, which is why runtime is so critical, because DSPM does not take that under consideration. DSPM products, again, they're very static. They're looking into those data stores, scanning those data stores, analyzing, giving the context of data to the misconfigurations of cloud, it's important, but it's really not enough to actually prevent those data leaks. Okay, I'll move on to the next one. What about cases where it's not a service integrated with an application environment, but a user using ChatGPT? Love this question. And I love this question because it's really kind of a bit out of the scope of what we discussed until now, because until now we were very much looking at the applications and external GenAI service integrated with the application itself. But indeed, there are cases of simply users, employees of the company using ChatGPT from their computer. There's nothing integrated in backend. It's just them using something that potentially they can copy paste even a huge task that contains sensitive information, either of employees or even of the company's customers' data. And I think in that case, I agree, this is a different use case. But that's also a data security problem. That's more of a, let's say, traditional endpoint DLP problems, because eventually you're still talking about data leaving the endpoints to another service, and you need capabilities that really will block probably, or at least enforce, even not block, but enforce in some way, or even alert a violation in some way. And again, it goes back to the basic that even in that case of data from an endpoint being leaked externally, it is a data security problem. Okay, to the next one. Are you as slow using GenAI and have these similar problems? Wow, I love this question. I love this question is because especially as product, I think it's super important for any company to use their own products and to see what are the gaps and how we can improve ourselves. So I can say that maybe specifically the use case that I brought in with this presentation, we do not have an external GenAI service that we're using, but I can definitely say that we're using a lot of GenAI internally, and we have very advanced models based on LLM actually for our classification models and also for an anomaly detection. So we are very heavy on AI and on machine learning, not surprisingly, as a data company. So one of the security use cases actually that we have that this GenAI DLP capabilities are super important is once we're talking about data moving from one environment to another one internally within organizations. And what do I mean by that? We have this tendency to think that data leakage could only happen when we're talking about internally to an external service, but that's not the case. If, for example, you have a PCI environment and sensitive data from that PCI environment leaves that environment, that's a problem. That's a violation of a very problematic violation. If you have connectivity or data flows of sensitive data between production and development or staging, huge problem. You need the ability to discover and alert about those type of cases, because that's kind of a one hop before the actual data will leave the internal environment. And that's the same thing with environments who are very heavy with machine learning and AI, and many of our customers really need to fence those environments, because usually environments that are heavy with BI, AI, machine learning, they are processing and analyzing super sensitive data, customer data, and as we are part of those type of organizations that we need to fence those assets and those data flows, and we need to be alerted every time sensitive data leaves the premises of that specific environment. And that could only be done if we're looking really at the source and the destination, if we're able to set policies on really on the data flows themselves and not just on assets. And which is another example, going back to my to the first question about runtime, is monitoring the data flows, monitoring the movement, the source and the dest, and the actual data that is moving from one place to another with minimal false positives. And that's a critical part, because specifically for data, if you have setting these policies and you have a lot of noise, and if you don't have the granular way to set policies that look actually into the payload itself, then you're going to have a lot of noise. So I answered it in many, many ways, and actually also got me back to the first question you asked, but I hope it really makes sense to you. I think we'll cover the last questions because the last question. So what do you mean by analyzing the entire data lifecycle? Okay, so I think that's a great question to kind of wrap this webinar up and to say that generally speaking, for data security, as we said, and it's also very much linked to the runtime analysis and the importance to look into the payload. It's not enough to look where data rests, where historically data is. We need to understand that looking into the entire phases that the data kind of makes within when it's moving from one place to another is critical. We need to look at data as it rests, but also as it flows and also as it's being processed by applications. Even if I take PCI DSS, for example, the ability and the need to control where the data is being processed and by whom is critical. Process data is one of the most interesting things and important things to know, so we can be able to then actually know how data is being processed and how we can also block afterwards. It's being processed by one hand, it has its outputs on the other, and if we do not look at data through its all stages, then we're kind of missing the context. We're missing how data is moving, what the lineage of the data. So these are very future, I don't want to say futuristic, but very future forward ways to look how data security should be handled by data security teams. And we as Flow, we strongly believe this is the only way to address the new problems of data security. And I think that we are about, out of time. So this was a great question to kind of finish our webinar with. Thank you so much for joining me, and I really hope that some of the questions you asked and the answers that I gave really kind of gave a bigger answer to the main question that we tried to cover here today. There were more questions that I did not have time to cover, and I'll be more than happy to follow up on them offline and maybe on one-on-ones. So again, thank you so much for joining me.